Hello there, you're listening to the Box Office Show. I'm Ryan Hill.
And I'm Dylan Johnson. Today we're going to be talking about the box office numbers from last weekend and our box office predictions for this upcoming weekend.
We'll also discuss another Oscar contender and a possible year-end favorite. We're discussing the cinematic adaptation of the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel by Colson Whitehead, Nickel Boys.
Exciting news. The Oscar nominations have finally come out. They were delayed a little bit because of the fires out in LA, but they have finally been revealed. We have some interesting surprises, definitely quite a bit of snubs, and definitely quite a few people that snuck in with nominations that we didn't think would be popping up. Leading the pack is Emilia Perez with 13 nominations, followed behind by, what is it? Brutalist with 10
and Wicked both got
with
10.
10. Yep, and some other surprises. A Complete Unknown with 8 nominations. A lot.
Indeed.
A lot more than I thought it would get. Anora received 6 or 8, I believe.
6.
And Dune with only 5. Denis Villeneuve, once again, snubbed for Best Director.
Insane. Just truly insane. I cannot believe it.
Do you think?
Why are they doing it?
Do you think he would have had a better chance had they released the movie later in the year, closer to the awards themselves?
No.
You think they just snub sci-fi movies?
I think so, because Oppenheimer was July and Everything Ever All at Once was, April? So it doesn't really make sense that, him releasing this, which was March? I mean, yeah, it's early in the year, but still, I mean, it should not have left people's memory because it was such an achievement. And especially off of Dune 1, when he also didn't get the nomination. So you would think the joint venture of Dune Part 1 and 2, they'd be like, all right, let's give this guy some recognition here at the Oscars.
Yep.
And yet they did not.
Instead, James Mangold snuck in for A Complete Unknown. Interesting.
Him, Jacques Audiard for Emilia Perez, and
Coralie Farget
for The Substance. So, yeah, an interesting selection there. We knew Corbet and Baker were going to be in there, but yeah, I feel like they definitely could have made room for Denis in there, but oh well.
Possible. Yeah.
We also have Demi Moore and Sebastian Stan. They gave the 2 best speeches at the Golden Globes, clearly auditioning for their Oscar nomination, and it paid off because Demi Moore got in, and we knew she would, but Sebastian Stan, he was able to sneak in as well.
Surprising because he was nominated for the movie he didn't win at the Golden Globes, but he did mention the movie in the speech because he won for A Different Man.
Exactly.
But he's nominated here for The Apprentice.
Which I thought was compelling. That's why it was definitely like an audition, because I think he knew he had a better shot with The Apprentice as compared to A Different Man at the Oscars, at least. And so him giving a shout out to the other film he was nominated for in his victory speech for A Different Man was compelling.
And as a result, in his category, at least, Daniel Craig snubbed for nomination for Queer. He was a shoo-in for a long, long time.
He was, but once the BAFTAs came out and Daniel Craig wasn't selected there, then it was pretty much a done deal that he wouldn't get in. But yeah, big changes here. And then Fernanda Torres getting in as well. Of course, she won at the Golden Globes, so we knew she was going to get a spot here. But a big surprise was her film, I'm Still Here. It was able to get into Best Picture, taking one of those 10 slots. So a big wave of momentum here for
first time in a long time, at least as long as I can remember, where more than one movie that is a foreign film has been nominated, or a foreign language film has been nominated for Best Picture.
Indeed.
There's usually always one, but this time we got 2, which I think is quite interesting.
So yeah, we'll need to loop back to that the International Film Oscar, because as the Academy goes more international and this happens more and more, it just becomes a little silly. But this means at least that race will be competitive, because I'm Still Here and Emilia Perez are battling it out in that international film category. So
absolutely,
that's interesting. We'll do a little sneak peek for our Oscar draft here. Of course, we'll do an Oscar predictions episode, go over who we think will win and should win for every category, and then also make our final predictions on who we think will take the crown for the Oscar draft this year. But a little sneak peek for the tallies so far. The roster that I selected, the total nominations for all of them combined is 35. Dylan, how about yours?
22.
You don't seem so happy. What's wrong?
No, I was definitely disappointed by Gladiator 2. Not a single nomination.
I
Or
got
one.
one.
One nomination, sorry, yeah. Still underperforming for sure. Honora got 6, which I think is exactly what I wanted to. Amelia Perez, great choice for nominations, got 13.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really good choice. Nickel Boys, only 2. Definitely a little bit disappointing. And my fourth pick was I gotta find my papers here.
It was Blitz.
Blitz, which got no nominations.
Indeed. Yeah, the
Tragic.
goose egg, the bagel, not always helpful when nominations come out. But we will see how things shake out. There's always, possibility. Again, Amelia Perez, 13 nominations. The
Yeah,
past few
that's really
years,
good.
whichever film has had the most nominations has taken the most wins. We'll see if that's the case this time. But I'm in a good spot right now.
Yeah, I'm 5 wins behind you. If I get 5 wins more than you do, I win. But it just doesn't seem likely.
Yeah.
Because you're already going to get at least like 4 or 5. That means I would need to get 10. Which
It's possible.
it's possible. We'll see.
It'll
I
be
mean,
tough.
if Amelia Perez sweeps, it will get best song. It'll take some maybe of the above the line awards, but you're going to get a bunch of technicals, which is not boding well for me.
Indeed. Well, we'll revisit that a few weeks before the Oscars and see
Indeed.
where the race stands. But for now, that's our initial reactions to the Oscars. Let's go to some news. Robert Eggers just came out with a vampire film, and he's already moving on to werewolves. He
King.
has confirmed that his next film, which should hit Christmas 2026, is going to
Nice.
be a period piece called Werewolf with a U in there. And
And
it'll
no
be
second E.
set in the 13th century.
Werewolf.
Indeed. So,
Werewolf.
your thoughts on this? Going from vampire to werewolf.
Very hyped. I liked Nosferatu. I wasn't in love with it, but even you who have seen it now must admit that it is gorgeous to look at. Like,
I've seen the trailers. I've been saying it looks incredible from a visual standpoint
dude,
for
the
forever.
shot of Nicholas Holt standing in the forest with the snow around him, and the slow pan around to the carriage waiting for him.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the best looking image from a movie last year, I think, in my opinion.
Well, we have
Incredible.
a little award show that we
We'll
do
do our little
during the Oscars.
categories, yeah.
That I
But
can tell you will be a nominee as well for me. So
yeah. Oh my god, it looks incredible.
yeah,
Got a crumb just looking at it, bro.
that's crazy. Anyway, we'll see.
Cut that one out.
So yeah, we'll see how that one goes and whether or not I get convinced to watch that. If it'll be super scary, but artistically worthwhile enough to give it a go.
I think the older
But
you get, the more horror movies you'll be willing to watch.
I mean, age is not. Do you think I'm scared? I'm a scaredy cat at
No, I just
the
think you'd
ripe
be
age of
more.
mid
No, I don't
20s.
think I don't think you're scared at all. I don't think scariness is the problem. I think you're just not interested in horror as a genre. I just think as you get older, your taste will change. And I think you will want to explore more different things. I don't think it has anything to do with scariness.
Right. Yeah, I don't think so. Again, I didn't really like Nosferatu. I can respect it, but it's just not my jam. So we'll see. I'll need to be convinced, but I know this is on a lot of people's like top 10 most anticipated already for that year because it's Eggers. But
Yeah,
for me, just because he works in that sort of horror mode, I'm not too hyped as of yet. But
yeah,
I'll be anxiously awaiting that trailer. Should be interesting.
should be.
Something I am hyped for.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Now that genre I will always be there for.
Sure.
And John Bernthal has been added to the cast, and John Bernthal is incredible. So I just wanted to report this as another, cast announcement here, and I'm so ready. I cannot wait.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty epic. Wait.
So yeah, very pumped, very very pumped for that. 2026, Christopher
What is
Nolan,
the
Robert
other? What is the
Eggers.
other John Bernthal thing we quote a lot
Uh,
from The Walking Dead?
what is that? Huh?
What is that,
What
huh?
is that?
What is that, huh?
As he runs after it. There's that.
Great.
There's a. Let me ask you something. I do that a lot now too,
You
because
do that a lot.
I do that in Larry David in Curb Your Enthusiasm. He also says that all the time, but it just always reminds me of John
Let me
Bernthal
ask you
saying
something.
that. So great stuff.
Let's do our box office breakdown for January 17th to the 19th. First place, Mufasa, The Lion King, with 12 million. It finally cracks the 200 million mark domestically. It is making quite a bit of moolah.
Indeed. On its debut, One of Them Days made $11.8 million.
And then Wolfman with 10.8 million.
And that was, again, we reported for the 3-day weekend. It was MLK weekends, and the top three didn't change. They all added like 3 to 4 million on their totals, but that was the top three.
Yeah, I really
So
thought One of Them Days was going to make more.
I know, yeah. You had to. You went and saw it, didn't you? I
I
saw it on
did.
your
It
Letterboxd. Any
was
thoughts?
good. I liked
Okay,
it. It's funny. It
nice.
is funny.
I do want to
SZA is
check that out.
really, really funny in it.
She is. Oh,
Kiki
nice.
Palmer is always funny. So like she's as 100% amazing as she always is. But like SZA was like a very welcoming surprise of like, oh, you're funny. I didn't go into it thinking SZA was going to steal the show, and she does in a lot of scenes. She does really, really well. I think SZA is really good.
All right,
But the
awesome.
story is just it's fun. It's new. It's original. It's the first time I've seen a comedy in a long time that's just a straight comedy that like I enjoyed. And so it was nice to see that. We just don't get a lot
Nice.
of those these days. Just straight up
It's
comedies anymore.
very true. So yeah, I'll hope to catch that one soon if I can. Sonic the Hedgehog 3 with 8.6 million.
Den of Thieves Pantera 6.5 million.
Moana 2, 6 million.
Nosferatu 4.1 million.
A Complete Unknown, 3.7 million.
Wicked 3.5 million.
And The Brutalist finally making its debut in the top 10 with 2 million.
And for our box office predictions for January 24th to the 26th, we have one new entry. It is the Mel Gibson directed, Mark Wahlberg starring thriller Flight Risk. Y'all need a pilot?
That trailer really just gets on my nerves so
I
much. I hate
think
watching it.
I think it's not a bad trailer. I've seen it so many times now that I watch it. I'm like, you know what? I think this is a movie I would see if it didn't end with him saying "Y'all need a pilot" in that stupid ass voice. I think everything
That's what
else.
takes you out of it.
I think everything else about the trailer is like, oh, it's kind of like it's the same concept as like Speed. You have a thriller in a single location on this moving vehicle. It's a plane in the middle of the air. You have an assassin on. It's a very small prop plane. 3 people. One of them's an assassin trying to kill one of the other people. Like I think like the concept is decent. I think it could be good. It has like I think Mark Wahlberg's a good actor. Mel Gibson is a good director. It could be something that could be interesting. But that stupid ass fucking line gets me every time. It makes me not want to see it. I think it's the catchphrase of the movie. Like it's the tagline of the movie. It's on the poster. It says "Y'all
It
need a
is?
pilot" on the
That's
posters. Yes.
insane.
Why
Did
did they
it
think
become a
that?
meme? Why'd they make that the tagline? I can't imagine that was the actual tagline before the trailer dropped.
I don't know. Maybe they're just trying to ride the wave of popularity. Like people will see this because they think the line is so funny. I don't know.
Wow.
Just trying to ride any kind of attention wave. All press is good press. I don't know. Y'all need a pilot.
So
It's not a good
you will
line.
not be visiting the theaters for Flight Risk?
I mean, if it gets like really good reviews, maybe, or if I'm bored, maybe, but I doubt it. That's something I think I would see just for the joke of it, like on streaming service when it comes out there. I don't
Hmm,
think I would go to the theaters for that.
gotcha.
But
Well,
maybe on like a Tuesday or something when I'm bored and I'm not watching a TV show or something, I'll throw something like that on. Yeah, I
well,
need
how
a
many
pilot,
people do you think will go and see it this weekend to
bro.
see them get a pilot?
I'm giving it like 6.5 million.
6.5?
Yeah,
Dang. I'll go higher. I think it can get 10 million. It'll probably win the weekend too because Mufasa's going to drop down. So 10 mil. You were saying 6? Yeah, that wouldn't
Eh.
even. You don't think it's gonna take number one?
I don't think so.
Dang.
Y'all need a pilot.
All right. Well, we will see next week how Flight Risk does. The first film from the new special ambassador to Hollywood, Mel Gibson. You saw that?
No,
It's
what?
like Mel Gibson and John Voight, like were people, which is a fake. But Trump just like announced he's like my special ambassadors are these random people. So Mel Gibson's one of them.
Oh,
So
so Donald Trump made a position,
again, it's not even like
invented
an
a
actual
fake
position.
position.
I
Yeah,
think
he
he's just
invented a
saying like,
fake
oh,
position.
these are my representatives, my special ambassadors. But
John Voight and Mel Gibson are funny choices.
yeah, again, it's just like there's one more too. I forget who it
Let
is,
me
but
pick the most cracked out white dudes I can find in Hollywood.
yeah, and they're all like, don't be deceived by Mel Gibson. Like he's crazy old too. He's like high 70s or
Yeah, they're
John
both
Voight's
old.
in his 80s, mid 80s, right? Something like that.
Yeah, they're both
It's
crazy people.
they're gonna usher us into a new golden age. Okay, they're bringing us back,
Yeah, I can't wait to
1970s,
see the
new
cinema they
American cinema.
produce.
Here we go. But all right, let's talk about Nickel Boys, something that is actually a very worthwhile film. Definitely will be, I think, very representative of the 2020s filmmaking. It is directed by RaMell Ross, the cinematographer, Jomo Frey. It is, like I said, an adaptation of the novel The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, won the Pulitzer Prize in 2020. So this film was nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. And it also was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay. It did not get a nomination for Best Director, which I think, especially after seeing this, is such a travesty as well.
Absolutely,
I would have had a
absolutely
very
travesty.
different
This is
five
his
for my Best
directorial
Director.
debut, isn't it?
For feature
Feature.
narratives, yes,
Yeah,
he's a
a
documentary
documentary.
filmmaker.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but this is such a strong narrative debut. He should have absolutely gotten a nomination.
100%.
I think more
So,
so than Denis Villeneuve. I'm sorry, Ryan.
I
But
mean,
maybe also I'm hating on sci-fi movies. Maybe I'm also a little too pretentious. Who knows?
yeah, I think you are. I think Denis definitely should be in there, and Ramel Ross should be as well, 100%.
Yeah,
So, if I had to sacrifice, no, I wouldn't, because there's other people in that top five I would take out for sure before Denis. But,
yeah, I would agree.
but yeah, he definitely deserved, I think, a Best Director nod for this, and cinematography too. So I think it's a shame that it wasn't.
Should have absolutely gotten a cinematography nomination with the
Didn't.
unique. I guess we'll get into talking about it, but there's just no way to have any conversation about the movie without talking about the unique way in which the story was told. It's a hardcore Henry style, first person perspective, which is it is an incredibly bold choice. Because let me tell
Mhm,
you, I've seen people do this a lot, and I've never seen it done in a way that I enjoyed, in the past. I've never
mhm,
enjoyed a movie that was shot first person perspective or a TV show or episode of TV show that was shot first person perspective. There's an episode of It's Always Sunny where they do that. I didn't even really like that one either.
mhm.
I've never, I've just never connected with it that much. But I think I guess let's start with our initial impressions first. I think seeing it like this in this manner, I think it's something that's very fresh and very new. And I think the way they approach the first person perspective, where it's not constantly moving the camera around like a human being's actual vision would be. They do settle on still images quite a lot, and then they also edit in archival footage and whatnot in a documentary esque style, which is of course Ramel Ross's background. That I think it breathes a little bit of life into that first person perspective, where it's not exhausting to watch. And I very much enjoyed that choice. I think it was a very very good, incredible choice that took me and put me into the perspective of those characters in a way that I don't think any other choice with this movie would have done so effectively.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's one of those things that you hear about of, oh, it's all shot in first person. It's like, okay, that's cool. But for 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is the runtime for this film, you're like, can it really sustain that?
Yeah, it's a
Is it going
lot.
to be nauseating? Is it going to be just gimmicky? But absolutely not. Like this was an incredibly bold decision, as you said, but the commitment and the follow through that they give to it was astounding. Because not
Agreed.
only does it put you into the literal like shoes and eyes of these characters for so much of it, but then they're able to leverage this perspective, like our normal approach now in seeing the world in this film is through the eyes of these characters. Whenever we have an interruption to that and a shift in perspective, it becomes so much more powerful. Like the
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you're able to get from some of those choices that they make is just wonderful. So yeah, I was blown away by how effective it ultimately ended up working for me.
Yeah,
And there's a whole lot else to the film and the construction of it, the way it's all arranged. You mentioned some of those like archival inserts that happen a lot. There's a lot to, and this is also part of his like documentary background of him just having these very intense close-ups of just everyday objects or people's fingers or
which I
just
love.
again things that are
It just
in
makes it so
view of
much
these
more of a
people.
unique experience to watch.
Exactly, yeah.
It's leaning into that first person perspective so heavily. There's so many times where the camera will shift and it'll make things out of focus, or it'll get really close, or it'll do actions for the characters because it's first person, like hugging, receiving a hug from the Nana, and
Hmm.
things like that. And I just it fully engrosses you in the sights and sounds of what these boys were going through, and it puts you exactly where they were in a way that no other kind of filmmaking could possibly do that.
Exactly, 100%. And the story itself as well, originating from like Colson Whitehead, it's a fictionalized version of like a real thing that happened. The Dozier School for Boys, which was in Florida. And I remember 10 years ago, they had like more than 10 years ago was when that shut down. And then they started finding all the like bodies that were just buried
Mm-hmm.
there and everything. So this is, a fictionalized version of that. And so it obviously touches on that experience of like Jim Crow South, all the injustices, the discrimination that uh, these boys had to go through. And again, they're like being taken to what is supposed to be a school, but again, they're working like slaves essentially uh, on the weekends and at the end of the weekdays and things like that. And they're also being used as pawns and like these money making schemes. The whole boxing little segment touched on that.
Mm-hmm.
So it does a great job as well of just contextualizing all of that through again these very two specific perspectives, like subjective experiences that we get, and again all that like archival stuff. We see all the space age things going on. We see Martin Luther King Jr. comes up a lot throughout this, and so I just think
Mm-hmm.
that blend of the very minute specificity that we're able to get from these characters, and then putting against the backdrop of everything that was going on in society at this point in time, like I just think it was so expertly done, and
Yeah.
so like I was truly taken aback by how well this film worked, how it fired on all cylinders.
I think it's especially jarring for at least me, I think you as well, but having grown up in Florida specifically, seeing all of these scenes take place in that environment of like very specific Florida, like dirt roads and like country and farms and like all the oak trees that they see in the footage, and then mixing that with the space age like Cape Canaveral footage and
Mm,
all of the rocket launches and things like that. I think just evokes such a strong impression of Florida, especially of that time. And I think that being a place that we grew up in and can recognize so distinctly, definitely for me at least, made it a lot more powerful.
mhm. Definitely, definitely. All right, well, let's start going into some spoilers because again, there are some moments here and there that I want to make sure people's experiences of them are preserved because
Mm,
they pack massive punches in the cinema. So go out and watch it if you have not
yeah.
yet, and then come back and listen to the rest of it. Um, but yeah, just going back to that, like the POV approach, and then the certain interruptions to that. There are like two major ones that I remember distinctly. The first one being when he's taken to what they call the White House, where they are beaten by the head master there.
Hmm.
Um, we see, there's two other boys that are there, and Elwood is like watching them and then hearing them when they're taken to that room getting whipped. And then when it's his turn, we see him get pulled up. He walks through the door, and then the camera remains stationary as Elwood continues on. And so it's like literally that out of body experience, that trauma response where people
Hmm.
are like looking at themselves rather than being part of it
Yeah.
because they need to just like distance themselves from that situation. So
Hmm.
that was breathtaking. Like that was very powerful.
Yeah.
And then the other moment is when we get those cuts to future Elwood
And
and
it's third person behind his head.
third
You
person.
don't
It's
see his
fixed
face.
on his head, so it still like has the same thing of like we're situated on him, we're fixated on him, but we're not seeing through his eyes. We're seeing just the back of his head. So that creates like another layer of separation because again, normally in film we're seeing actors' faces and we're able to register every emotion that is coming across it. When we're seeing through their eyes, it's interesting because on one hand, it's like, okay, we're seeing everything they are, but we're not as connected to knowing like how they feel about certain things because we're not seeing how they take it in. This one, of course, we can't actually see everything they're literally seeing, and we don't get to see the face. So it's just that like
Hmm.
probably furthest separation you could have from a character. And the reason for it is just so brilliant. Like this that revelation that comes here, which is that we are not actually seeing who we thought we were initially. I just think that was so brilliant. So your what were your thoughts on that? And at what point did you start to put the pieces together that we were not looking at Elwood in the future? We were looking at Turner.
I didn't. I didn't put it together at all until uh, Elwood gets shot. I really thought it
Mm.
was Elwood. I was expecting. I was fully expecting Turner to be shot, and for Turner
Oh.
to die, and for Elwood to get away. Like I didn't think they were building to a twist at all, which I think is effective. Uh, because the whole time the only real indications they kind of give is he's doing research on this thing, and I'm like surprised that he's not more based on how Elwood is in the past. I'm surprised that like current day Elwood is not more energetic about coming forward and talking about it. I thought like of all the characters, he would be the one to lead the charge of like revealing the horrors of the reform school. And the only other indication is the conversation he has with the former classmate that he meets at the bar. That very extended conversation they have, and he alludes to how they never say his name. He never calls him Elwood because obviously he knows him as Turner, but he never says his name. They just talk about how he got away, like well, how did you leave? And he says you don't remember. He talks about how like it is a more eccentric reason why he left. Like it's alluding to that. So I knew something was going to happen with how the boys get away from the school. And so when they
Hmm.
start that escape chase, I'm thinking, okay, at some point, like Turner is obviously having a change of heart here. He's willing to stand against the establishment now in the same way that Elwood was. He's not willing to let Elwood die here because obviously Elwood is about to be, buried in the back with the other boys. And I think that was enough of a change to where had they like taken that character's life, it would have been like a full circle story for his character, or not a full circle, like a full arc for his character to stand up against the establishment and give his life for others instead of being a more pragmatic individual trying to save his own skin and do things
Hmm.
for himself. And so when Elwood gets shot, I was like taken aback. I was like, how are they going to get out of this? How is Elwood going to get away with this? And then they do the shot of him being in the train and moving on. And then I realized it was Turner that's getting away. And Turner knows the grandma, of course, because he met her. And so Turner coming to the door and like the grandma crying and holding him, that was very powerful because that's the full realization, the full come about that Elwood has died. And then they're
Hmm.
cutting that with the images of him taking Elwood's name and Elwood's place so that he can get away from the reform school. And it just I don't know, it hurts. It is very powerful and it's very shocking. And I definitely cried a little bit. Yeah, when Elwood dies, it's definitely like it's just so harmful. Someone who cared so much, who didn't deserve to be there in the first place, who
I
had such a
know.
bright future, who was such they all of these kids have such great potential, and they show Elwood's potential and like his dedication to what is right over what is wrong in a world that doesn't care about that, and it still steps on him, and I think that crushes me a little bit.
Yeah, I think
To
the
watch somebody care so much about being willing to stand up, fighting with like picketing for the sake of picketing and standing with Martin Luther King and wanting to be the face of change and not being given the chance to even do it. and being knocked down and kicked down before he even has a chance to shine, and then having his life taken away from him for one brief even attempt of standing up.
Mm-hmm.
Just hurts me, man.
Yeah, it was terrible because yeah, he was just thrown in there from a stupid situation where he was going to college, just trying to get, uh, you know, a lift basically to get the rest of the way there,
Mhm.
and then just happened to be
In a
in the
stolen car.
passenger seat of someone that had stolen the car or something like that. I don't even know what exactly was the situation there, but then Elwood
I
has to face
love
those consequences.
Yeah, I love in the beginning it's a little difficult to follow what's going on before he gets to reform school. Part of that for me was because I walked in 5 minutes late. Maybe you could fill me in
No.
on dude, I was so disappointed. I was racing as fast as I could to get to the theater.
Oh,
I walked in when he's sitting in the restaurant and the teacher comes up to him to tell him about the school.
mm.
What did I miss leading up to that?
It started on a lot of beautiful imagery of it's like the kid when he's a kid and you see his hand and he's twirling a
Oh my
leaf
god, dude.
in
That
his
was
hand. Did you see the iron when she's ironing and you see his reflection in the iron?
no, I didn't see that
Oh,
either.
it's a beautiful shot. That's so tragic.
Fuck, dude.
But that's like the first time you see the kid, and then there's a later one, which maybe you saw, maybe not. It's also him. I guess yeah, not. It's him as like a kid, and it's some sort of civil rights thing that's going on in the the televisions that would be at the storefronts. And
Mhm.
so he's just watching that, and
I
you could
saw
also
that. I
see his
walked
reflection.
in, I think, when that was happening, and then it cuts to the
Mm,
restaurant scene because I think I walked in at the end of that. I was
gotcha,
trying to pick up where everything was going. I knew it was first person perspective, so at least I had the advantage of knowing what was happening with the camera and whatnot before
gotcha.
even walking in. But I was
Yeah,
trying to catch up with okay, so he's going to school. He's obviously involved in protests. He lives with his grandma. His grandma loves him very much.
yeah. You didn't
Uh,
mention much plot. Like it was just I think settling
yeah, yeah.
the audience into that perspective and how this
I
is going to approach everything.
I really enjoyed the beginning scenes before the reform school because there's so many like little subtle things that I think are important to set kind of the tone and the mood. I think the scene where he's talking to his grandma about wanting to protest more and picket, and he's like telling her that, and she's really proud of him. He keeps like looking back and forth between her being proud, but also like scared, and then looking back at the flyer for the college as it's slowly sliding down the fridge. The idea
Yes.
that that's like being taken from his grasp as he's like wanting to fight more for his like rights, for his civil rights. The idea that his like education and his freedoms are like coming away from him because of those choices, I think is very very stark. And then I love the after he gets arrested and he's because the cop obviously makes note of the fact that the car was stolen, and then it cuts to him back home, not in prison. We skip all of that. He's back home, and you just hear the grandma talking about uh, how he was a mistake. He was just in the wrong place, wrong time. He shouldn't have to be punished for that. Like it's giving the information that he's going to the reform school as a result of those choices. And we've skipped all of the trial work. We've skipped all of the jail, the county jail and whatnot that he presumably went to. And we're just cutting straight to he is like receiving a punishment for this thing that we know was entirely not his fault, which I think is a very good choice of like that's all information that we just don't need to see. It's not important to the story. All we
Hmm.
need to know is it's like very efficient storytelling. He's in a situation, he gets in trouble, he's going to the reform school. And what they choose to focus on is his relationship with his grandma and like the hurt look on Anjanae Ellis's face when she is like cutting him the slice of cake, trying to make him feel better, and knowing that he's going somewhere that is going to be bad for him and that he's like losing opportunities because of this thing that wasn't even his fault, and knowing like the hurt that that's going to cause. And then the close-ups on the cake that are almost entirely out of focus and you're just seeing like the fluffy white cake. I think it's
Hmm.
just such vivid imagery and such like incredible choices in the way that they're telling that story. So I love the way the movie starts off with everything before the reform school. I think is excellent.
Yeah. Again, those close ups, just so incredible. And there's a lot of those little moments. Again, those first few that you were able to see of like twirling the leaf and everything.
Hmm.
Um, Watching the magnet slide down, which I love your interpretation there of like the deeper meaning to that. And there's another moment too of like the balloon, like he's slowly releasing the balloon string, and then it goes up and hits the fan, the ceiling fan. Just all those little moments of like just what people
Yeah.
do and what we focus on. Um, like I think it's just a great way to again really get across this authentic first person perspective
I
and get
think the
us into
thing
his
that
shoes.
I think the thing that shocks me so much about Elwood in the future ending up being Turner is that even though we get both of their first person perspectives, and I think the point is to show that their experiences were so similar in this reform school that their perspectives are somewhat interchangeable, and like their whole lives growing up as young black men in this place in this time was so similar in experience that their lives are interchangeable in a lot of ways. But I think the thing that maybe not see the twist coming was, if even though I get both of their perspectives, even though we'd see both of their POVs, it feels more like Elwood's story in the sense that we're getting all this background for him and we're constantly flashing back to that background. And it feels like when we go to the future and look at Elwood, it's as if everything we've seen that is the main story is us experiencing his memories, us
Hmm.
living out his lived experience and his relationship to Turner. So it turning out to be Turner was shocking because I guess what I my understanding is that they were trying to show that because he was there for a lot of it and because he's now filling in the shoes of Elwood and he's living that such similar life that those memories are in a lot of ways shared with him because of all the time they spend together. I'm sure those are all things that they told each other and that they have similarities with and that they can both relate to because of how similar they are as people and how similar the situations are. I think that those memories are profound moments in their lives as young men in that time that they can connect to each other and relate. And I think that is like the shared memory that they have there is beautiful. That their POVs can be so intertwined that they can have those shared memories. I think it's gorgeous. And the movie that I relate it to the most, feeling like a memory, like watching a memory. Did you ever watch After Sun from a few years ago with Paul Mescal?
I've not been able to catch it yet. No.
It's a lot like that of just like feeling like you're experiencing a memory in the most ethereal of senses of just
Hmm.
trying to remember everything the best way that you can and everything feels otherworldly almost because it is a memory and not because it is reality.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that. I'd be curious. I can't remember the distinct points where we start getting that, jump to the future, and when it
Hmm.
becomes clearly that's like, okay, we're getting this nonlinear story here. But I would imagine that probably came after we first shift into Turner's POV.
It is, yeah.
Um, so yeah, that makes sense that that starts coming into the story once we
It
actually
comes
have like
after the
Turner.
beatings, I think, like immediately after the beatings, the first beating, because he gets beat and it's like very intense. Yes, because it's
Because we see
very
the
intense.
pictures of the
It's very
people, and then we see
shocking.
him
Yeah.
looking at the computer monitor,
Yes.
looking at those pictures. Yeah.
Yes. And then we learn the context of, oh, we're looking at Elwood in the future and he's looking back upon the school and we're learning about bodies being buried. And so we're being told that they have killed students, that even though we've only seen them beat students, we know that they kill them as well.
Hmm. So yeah, that was the turning point there.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, with the like that reveal, it was something that just because I was trying to figure out who we were seeing that first time, and I don't think they say the name Elwood. Like his girlfriend, wife, whoever he's with, like
Mm-hmm.
says Elwood, and so that's when we are clued into the fact like, okay, this is our Elwood for sure. We're primed already to believe that it's Elwood since he's definitely the person we start on. So he's
Mm-hmm.
our main protagonist of the two. But
Yeah.
I
Everything is
remember,
telling you that it's Elwood. There's
yeah,
nothing telling you that it's Turner.
except I was looking because I was just trying to figure out who it was, and so I was looking. There's brief moments where you can see his hands because again he has like those dreads, so his neck's all covered. And you can't see his
Mm-hmm.
face at all, but there's like brief periods where you can see his hands moving, and I saw
Mm-hmm.
that it was lighter skin than Elwood, and I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, so maybe that's. But later on, when we're told Elwood, when she's like referring to him as Elwood, I'm like, oh okay, and I was like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I feel like they definitely would not have just picked an actor
Like
with
done a
lighter
casting
skin
choice,
color.
yeah.
Like they definitely would have been more purposeful about that. But I'm like, okay, whatever. Um, and then it was confirmed for me when they were at the bar, when he was at the bar, and then the other guy shows up and he's like, "Hey, who's your friend? Who's your friend?" And I'm like, okay, the reason he's
Yeah.
so tense about this is because he does not want to be recognized as Turner
I have a
when he's
similar
supposed to be Elwood.
experience. I have a similar experience in the sense that I recognized that it was Daveed Diggs' voice. So I was like,
Oh,
okay, Daveed Diggs is playing this character. And he is like lighter skinned than the
Hmm.
actor they picked to play Elwood. And I was like, at the same time though, we're not seeing his face this whole time. It could be not even David Diggs doing the physical performance. It could just be his voice. Uh, so I have no idea. It really like it was like there could be so many casting reasons why they would do that. Like it's not unbelievable that they would cast like a lighter skinned person to play the same character. Like it's perfectly possible. Wouldn't take anything away from the movie, especially if we're not actually seeing his face or any parts of his body other than his hair. Like it would have been perfectly fine. But I was
I
like,
think,
David
yeah.
Diggs is like if they ever do like do a reveal on his face, David Diggs is interesting to because he just doesn't look anything like the guy they have playing Elwood. You know?
Hmm. Yeah. So that, yeah, the bar scene again, I confirmed for me that it was in fact like Turner impersonating Elwood, and then
So
by
you
that point we didn't
knew
know
pretty early on.
what had happened. But just because I was like, this scene is taking so long, and I'm like, the tension that's underneath all of that is his fear of recognition. Like, it's not just, oh, we're,
Mm.
excavating the ghosts of the past by talking about
Yeah,
the
that's what
school.
I
It's
thought it was. To me, I thought it was being reminded of that past that he wanted to
Mhm.
be avoiding at that point in his life. Because right at that point, he's not. This is still the '80s or whatever, '90s maybe, where he's just trying to run his moving company and live with his girlfriend or wife.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's like ready to face that because he doesn't really come to terms with facing that stuff until the computer age of like 2010s, where he's revisiting all those pictures and whatnot and debating whether or not he should come forward.
Hmm. Gotcha. But yeah, so I think it's definitely, it'd be interesting for you to rewatch it with like that perspective in mind, and then for me
Yeah,
going back to like those earlier moments as well, because I can't, because the Sidney Poitier, like those moments as well,
I love that. I
clearly are,
love,
the fantasy of them being able to escape and everything,
dude.
and Poitier being such a, like, especially at that time, like probably one of the few, if not the only, like black movie star that was there. So like the impact of him on those two characters as they're in this situation where they're like hoping to escape the system and everything, is very
I
profound. And I'd
love,
love to see more of that, like knowing all that stuff, being able to connect those dots from the beginning, watching it back.
yeah, I love the use of archival footage from old movies being cut
Hmm.
into this one, as well as like, of course, the images of the space race and whatnot. I think it makes it feel more documentarian intentionally because obviously RaMell Ross is a documentarian, but it just I don't know, contextualizes everything in such a great way. The using the entire opening sequence of the Defiant ones in
Hmm.
there with Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis, including like the credit sequence. It's great.
Yeah.
I think it just works so fantastic. And then immediately cutting to him sitting in the back seat with the white boys going to Nickel.
Hmm.
And then the white boys getting out and being like introduced to their prison life in like this very nice mansion and
Yeah.
with like nice clothes, and then immediately driving down to the more rundown buildings with other students who are not dressed as nicely because they just get worse accommodations, of course. And then just the comparison of the entire time of seeing the white kids at the reform school playing football and dressing nice and like having a good time, and then all the black students are not in any classes at any point really. They're just doing work nonstop.
Hmm.
They're picking things in a field. They are painting things. They're just tending to yard work and whatnot. Very rarely do we see them in any kind of an education. They're in education settings, but they're not taught very seriously. They're taught like very remedial courses, and they're not really checked on whether or not it's not really cared whether they learn the material or not. It's more so to cross a box to say that they attempted an education of some kind.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Which is terrible, and also it was illegal at that time. Like segregation was supposed to be
Hmm.
ended, but of course,
Yeah.
there's no oversight at that place. It's a boarding school, and so they just have like the free reign to
Yep.
do this to those people, which is awful. Um, the some going back to other like documentarian elements from Ramel Ross. The did you ever see his documentary? I think it was Oscar nominated. The Hale County this morning, this evening.
No.
Were you able to catch that? I did see it this past fall,
Okay.
and one thing that stuck out to me from that was his use of time lapse. Like, there's many little sequences in there where it's just a like very rapid time lapse of the little town that is there, and those are always very compelling. Again, a lot of that documentary, he has these very extended takes, a lot, that he ends up incorporating into
Mm-hmm.
this film. So you can definitely see his roots there. But I was wondering, going into this film, I was like, I know that's his like favorite little technique to do is the time lapse. So I was like, is it going to pop up in Nickel Boys at all with this, POV approach? How's he going to be able to find a way to do it? And there was just two sequences, and they're sort of, the first one came up, and the second one is sort of revisiting it. But it's the escape on the train, like him
Uh-huh.
being on the train, and you can see the shoes and like the very ends of his pants.
Mm-hmm.
But it's him on the train as he's ostensibly fleeing home. The first time we see it, we assume it's like Elwood having a dream, right? Like again, we already
Yeah.
know the Defiance one is in his mind, and then we see this, and that's ultimately our bridge to Turner. Like we end the train sequence, and then we go to Turner's POV for the very first time in the film. Then by the end of it, when we have that perspective shift after Elwood gets shot, we
Mm-hmm.
cut to the third perspective on Turner as he's fleeing. So then we're able to make the connection of like, oh, future Elwood is actually Turner, because this is the only other time we see him with like that third person camera setup.
Mm-hmm.
Then we see him on the train escaping.
Yep.
We see him departing. So it's like that train as the first bridge from Elwood to Turner, where we get that first person POV shift. And then the train comes back around when we see that Turner is adopting Elwood's identity, basically. And so there's that other perspective shift there. I just thought that was like so brilliant, like an incredible way to one sneak in his favorite little technique, which
Mm-hmm.
hey, as creatives, as directors, there's things that we love and we gotta just put them in there. But it having this additional meaning to it, I thought was just spectacular. So I was very happy to see that. Um, and again, just so powerfully done, like that image of escape and like being able to have freedom. When we see it that second time, it's it's not as
Mm-hmm.
fond and joyous as we thought it would be, because we know he's leaving behind his companion, like the person that he wanted to leave with, but he wasn't able to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that like ride to freedom is just soaked in a bit of despair there. So it's yeah, just great stuff. Again, like the direction from
Yeah.
Ross is just top tier.
Yeah. I want it to be known that of course I have my script, the script we have for the show set up here on the computer that I'm looking at that has our notes from the movie, and
Hmm.
uh usually I am like referring back to them so that I can remember things and I can make my points clearly and I can see what you're putting down, so that, and it's mostly your perspective, of course. And this time I've been focused on looking at you. I haven't really looked at most of the script, and so I didn't notice until 5 minutes ago when I went to read most of it that you had written down of the two close-ups and lingering shots. You put the magnet sliding down the fridge and the close-up on the icing on the cake. I want it
Hmm.
to be known that I did not see that you wrote that down before we started. Before I like went and talked about those two very specific instances of like things that I thought were unique and interesting.
Hmm.
I think it's fascinating because I looked over and I read it and I went, "Wait, those are the two things that I talked about."
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that that was the like something so powerful, such powerful imagery and such powerful, unique uh, imagery. I guess that it affected both of us in that way. I think that's neat.
100%. Yeah, they were definitely instantly like burned into my brain. So
Yeah.
that's fascinating. But yeah, are there any other thoughts that you want to bring up about Nickel Boys?
I think everything after the boxing sequence, which also fantastic. The him's trying to say that he thought it was the second round. He thought like
Mm,
the devastating knowledge of like the outcome that is going to befall him because he messed up. The like look on Spencer's face as he sees that he's lost money because of this. Uh, that is hard to watch. Him saying that this isn't the real fight. Turner saying or Elwood saying that this is not the real fight.
mm-hmm.
That hurts for sure. But everything after that point, up until maybe like the last 45 minutes where they're contemplating leaving and we're getting closer to like more moving kind of. It's like a good hour or like 45 minutes in the middle of the movie where it kind of slows down a lot for me. And I think
Mm,
it's of course intentional. They're trying to just get us to connect more with Elwood and Turner as like a partnership, as like a pairing of friends, which I can respect and I can understand. But it just slows down a little bit, and found myself getting. Maybe I was just too tired I was very very tired when I saw the movie, and I was like very sleepy. Maybe it was just a bad viewing experience. Maybe I would feel differently in a different place, but there were other parts in the movie where I was more engaged, and I just didn't feel myself as engaged as I was like to be. But I think this is definitely a movie that merits a rewatch. I will be seeing it again at some point for sure, and perhaps that would positively impact how I rank this movie or rate this movie. But right now, it's not
gotcha.
as high as I would like to rate it as a result of that specific like pacing decision or my interaction with that pacing decision, my experience with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fair. I didn't. It is a long movie. Again, it's like 2 hours 20 minutes.
Hmm.
I didn't feel the length too much when I was watching it. I honestly wanted a bit more, especially at the ends. I wanted to
Hmm.
see more of Turner, who we now know as future Elwood. I wanted to see more of where they were going with that, and like more of his reckoning, and uh, if he returned to the grounds of the Nickel Academy or not, and how
Dude,
he
I
would feel
cried
with
at the
that.
end when the ending shot is Elwood walking up helping Turner stand up.
Hmm. That was
That made me
beautiful.
cry.
And then I forget what she says in that moment, but it was something there like, "What are you going to do, Turner or Elwood?" Something like that. Um, I just would have liked a little more on that because again, we spent so much time with these characters and especially them together, and you got to
I think.
imagine like all the guilt and hurt that Turner
Mhm.
is feeling, and now that you've also like adopted somebody else's identity in order to be able to like save yourself and everything, but now it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
lived out the rest of his life. Like that's such a like powerful but upsetting idea, and I wish we would have just explored that a little more at the end there.
I think I was
um,
okay with where it concluded. I think it leaves off enough for me to be able to say yes, they he is quite literally being helped up by Elwood or the memory of Elwood so that he can continue on in that mission of speaking up and standing up for what is right. And so I think the ultimate conclusion is that he decides to come forward, even though they don't
mhm,
show it. I think that's what the implication is.
right. But yeah, I just think there was more dramatic potential there that we could have explored perhaps. And again, I was locked in. I was ready. There was 2 hours 20. I was ready for maybe 10 more. But all right, let's give our ratings. How many hugs from Nana out of 5?
I'm gonna give it 4.5.
There you go. I'm also giving it 4.5.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is a fantastic movie,
Yeah.
and I definitely want to at some point give it a rewatch because I think there's so much more to
Mm-hmm.
unpack. Again, all
Yeah.
those little archival pieces of footage, the interstitials
So
they have in
good.
there, things that we didn't even touch on, like the gators that would pop up here and there, uh, just randomly in his
Mm-hmm.
view, things like that. I think there's just so much more to
So
discover.
many little things that make it feel more like a memory.
Hmm.
That make it feel like a dream almost. Like he's remembering these things in his sleep and that they're affecting him. I
Right.
love the Gators popping up. It's so Florida.
Indeed, I guess. Yeah. When in Florida. But so yeah, I'm very excited to see more discussions about this film. It's also
Yeah.
one that's not, again, Nickel Boys, Brutalist in a way, Sing Sing, all these films I feel like have been very odd with their release schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope Nickel Boys doesn't get buried because I think it should have got more Oscar love. I wonder if it had been released slightly earlier, if it would have gotten more Oscar love. But yeah, I think it would definitely pop up on my end of the year list. So we at least will be talking about it more in a couple weeks, and then come our Oscar episode, certainly there will be more things to discuss there.
Certainly. That is all the time we have. If you'd like to give your thoughts on the show, you can email us at theboxofficeshowpod@gmail.com.
Our main title theme for the show is Sundown by Joseph McDade.
If you like the show, please give us 5 stars on whatever podcast app you're listening to, and be sure to tune in next week. Have a great rest of your day.